He stopped for flowers to propose, then saw his ex with twin girls who looked exactly like him. Nathan Blake had always lived by plans, calculated, strategic, flawlessly timed. He was the golden boy of tech entrepreneurship, a self-made millionaire before 30, and a name investors didn't just respect, but feared. His entire schedule was built down to the minute, and today was no different. Everything had been set: the ring in his coat pocket, the private dinner reservation, the soft proposal speech he had practiced twice that morning. By evening, he was supposed to be engaged to Christine, the face of a luxury fashion brand and the woman everyone assumed was the perfect match for a man like him. He wasn't nervous about the proposal, at least not in the traditional sense. He liked control. He liked when life aligned. This marriage was supposed to be the next logical step, the merger of two perfect lives. But there was a restlessness under his skin as he drove through the city, something he didn't want to acknowledge. He told himself it was adrenaline, excitement. Just nerves. The florist he stopped at wasn't on the itinerary. He passed it by chance, a small storefront nestled between a bakery and an old bookstore, with a crooked sign that read, H. Bloom and Company. The shop was nothing special from the outside, a little worn around the edges, like the kind of place that hadn't changed in years. He almost kept driving. But at the last second, something pulled him in. Maybe he wanted the lilies. Maybe he wanted a break from perfection. Maybe he just needed a moment to breathe. When he stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed, soft and nostalgic. The air was warm, humid from the plants, and filled with the fragrance of earth and jasmine. He barely had time to take it in before he saw her. She was bent over a bucket of white roses, her brown hair pulled into a messy knot at the back of her neck, a pencil tucked behind one ear. She wore a plain apron dusted with pollen and soil, and when she looked up, Nathan felt his pulse stop. It was Haley. His Haley. Or at least, the woman who used to be. Time slammed to a halt. In the 6 years since they'd last spoken, Nathan had convinced himself she belonged to another life, a younger, simpler version of himself. Seeing her now, so real, so close, unraveled that lie in an instant. Her eyes met his, and something unreadable flashed through them. Not shock. Not joy. Just recognition, and then the flicker of a wall sliding into place. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm, like they'd never been anything more than strangers. He opened his mouth to speak, but then two small voices rang out behind her. "Mommy, we finished the little roses." Nathan's head turned automatically. Two little girls, identical in every feature, peeked around the flower cart, each holding a tiny watering can. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. 5, maybe 6 years old. Dressed in matching pink overalls, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. They looked like they'd been playing in petals and dirt all morning. They looked like him. Something inside Nathan buckled. He stared as the girls ran to Haley's side. She crouched and touched each of their foreheads with such natural tenderness that it punched the air right out of his lungs. She whispered something to them, and they giggled before skipping off toward the back of the shop. Nathan hadn't moved. His heart pounded in his ears. His thoughts screamed over each other, fighting to catch up to what his eyes had already confirmed. They were his. They had to be. The age lined up. The resemblance was undeniable. But no one had called him Daddy. No one had said his name. It was like he was invisible in a life that should have been partly his. "Still want the lilies?" Haley asked, her tone even, but her eyes sharp. He blinked, realizing he hadn't said a word since walking in. Automatically, he nodded. She moved to the cooler and picked out a small but perfect bunch, wrapped them in brown paper, and tied them with twine. The whole time, she didn't ask how he'd been. She didn't demand an explanation. She didn't look angry. She looked resolved. When she handed him the bouquet, their fingers brushed briefly. It felt electric, then gone. Nathan took the flowers, paid without saying more than a quiet thank you, and walked out of the shop like a man sleepwalking. He got into his car. The ring in his coat pocket felt heavier than it had that morning. He was supposed to be heading to Christine, to champagne and candlelight and a carefully curated yes. Instead, he sat in the parking space outside a flower shop, staring at the closed door, his mind replaying one image on a loop: Haley, surrounded by flowers, and two little girls with his eyes and her strength. He never made it to dinner. He didn't call Christine. He didn't even drive home right away. Because in that moment, Nathan Blake, the man who had everything, realized there was an entire life he'd missed, and it had been growing just fine without him. The following days passed in a haze that Nathan couldn't shake. He went through the motions: meetings, investor calls, product updates, but his focus was fractured. Numbers blurred on screens, voices faded into background noise, and every spare second in between was haunted by the memory of Haley and the twin girls in that flower shop. The resemblance wasn't something he could dismiss. It wasn't just in their features, it was in their energy, their expressions, even the shape of their smiles. He had spent his entire adult life mastering the art of logic, of clear decisions and cause and effect thinking, but now he was caught in something completely outside his control. And the weight of it was suffocating. He hadn't told anyone, not Christine, not his assistant, not even the mentor who had become like a second father. He couldn't. Because if he said it out loud, it would be real, and he wasn't ready for that truth. He'd walked away from Haley years ago thinking it was for the best, thinking his ambition couldn't coexist with love. He had told himself she deserved someone better, someone who wouldn't be buried in deadlines and ambition. But deep down, he knew the truth was simpler and uglier: he had been afraid. Afraid of commitment, of being vulnerable, of building something that couldn't be managed through a spreadsheet. Now he had proof of what he left behind: two small, undeniable pieces of himself he hadn't even known existed. And worse, Haley had raised them on her own. She had done it without reaching out, without asking for a dime, without publicly outing him. It wasn't pride, it was strength. And it terrified him. By Friday, he couldn't take it anymore. He canceled his morning meetings, ignored Christine's texts, and found himself once again in front of the same flower shop. This time, he didn't walk in with a script. He had no idea what he was going to say, only that he couldn't walk away again. Haley looked up the moment the bell above the door rang. Her expression didn't change. She was wearing a different apron today, one with a faint lavender print, and her hair was pulled into a loose braid that made her look even younger than he remembered. The girls weren't visible, which gave him a small sense of relief. This conversation wasn't one they should overhear. "You came back," she said, not with surprise but with a certain tired awareness, like she had known this was inevitable. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "Privately." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the risks of reopening a door she had long since bolted shut. Then she nodded toward the back room. 5 minutes. "I have deliveries coming in soon." The back room was small but tidy, filled with buckets of stems, a battered wooden table, and the scent of fresh greenery. Haley closed the door behind them and leaned against the wall with her arms crossed. She didn't offer him a seat. Nathan hesitated, then exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Are they mine?" Her eyes narrowed just slightly, not with malice, but with the sharpness of someone who had carried too much alone for too long. "You really want to start there?" I have to know." "Yes," she said, simply. "They're yours." The words hit him like a freight train, even though he had already known. Still, hearing it was something else. It shifted the ground beneath him. "They're 5?" he asked. "They turned 5 last month," she replied. "Their names are Lily and Sophie." Nathan sat down slowly on the edge of the table, suddenly lightheaded. Why didn't you tell me? Haley's laugh was bitter, quiet. Tell you what, Nathan? That the man who vanished overnight, who chose his company over a future with me, had fathered twins? You think I didn't want to? I did. But you didn't leave a forwarding address. You didn't even leave a goodbye. And once I realized you'd gone for good, I made a decision. I wasn't going to chase you down to make you a father if you weren't ready to be one. He dropped his gaze, ashamed. I was scared. I know, she said softly. But I was scared too. And I didn't get to walk away from that fear. I had to carry it. Every day. Through the pregnancy, through the nights when they both screamed for hours, through the bills and the loneliness and the doubt. I did it. Not because I was a hero, but because there was no other choice. Nathan looked up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to know them. Haley didn't answer right away. Her eyes searched his face like she was looking for something, truth, maybe, or regret, or change. I'm not going to stop you, she finally said. But don't you dare come into their lives unless you plan to stay. I won't let them be heartbroken by someone who only visits when it's convenient. They don't know who you are yet. To them, you were just a nice customer who bought flowers. If this is just about guilt or curiosity, walk away now. Spare them. It's not that, Nathan said, shaking his head. I didn't know, Haley. But now I do. And I can't forget it. I want to be in their lives. I don't care how long it takes, I'll earn it. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She just studied him in silence. Then the door creaked open, and two small faces peeked in. Mommy, the delivery truck is here. Sophie announced, her cheeks flushed from running. Haley turned to them. Okay, I'll be right there. The girls looked at Nathan curiously, sensing something, but saying nothing. When they disappeared again, Nathan stood, his legs stiff. I'll come back, he said. Only if you want me to. Haley opened the door and walked past him. We'll see, she said over her shoulder. Time will tell if you mean it. Nathan left the flower shop for the second time in a week, but this time, something was different. The first time, he had walked out a stranger. Now, he was a father. Not yet in their eyes, but in truth. And that truth would change everything. Nathan began returning to the flower shop every few days, careful not to overwhelm or push too hard. Each visit was quiet, deliberate, and filled with a sense of cautious hope. He didn't demand conversations or explanations. He simply showed up. Sometimes he bought a bouquet, sometimes he asked about certain plants, and other times he just sat on the wooden bench outside the store, sipping coffee and watching the world pass. Haley didn't welcome him with warmth, but she didn't send him away either. That, in itself, felt like progress. The twins, Sophie and Lily, remained unaware of who he truly was, but the connection between them was undeniable. They were drawn to him, and he to them, in a way that neither logic nor time could erase. On his fourth visit, Sophie ran up to him with a dandelion crown she had made and insisted he wear it on his head like a flower king. Nathan, who once negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking, found himself crouching in the dirt, proudly wearing a crooked ring of weeds made by a little girl with sparkling blue eyes. Lily joined in, declaring him officially part of the garden. That moment cracked something open in him that he hadn't realized was still closed. Haley watched all of this unfold from behind the counter. Her gaze lingered longer now, and though her posture remained guarded, there was a softness creeping in. Nathan didn't ask her questions about the past. He knew he didn't have the right. Instead, he started learning about the present, how Sophie loved painting flowers with her fingers and always mixed purple and yellow together because it makes magic, and how Lily liked lining up all the plant labels in perfect rows and hated when her sister moved even one of them. He memorized their favorite snacks, their giggle patterns, the way they both scrunched their noses when confused. He collected these pieces silently, treasuring every new discovery as if they were rare jewels. One afternoon, after helping the girls sort tulip bulbs, Nathan stayed behind as Haley closed up the shop. She didn't speak at first, just swept the floor and tidied the workspace, but then she looked at him with a curious expression. "You really didn't know," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "No," he replied. "And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Haley leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her face unreadable. "They're good kids. Strong. Kind. But they've never had a dad. And they never asked why. I guess I always hoped that if I just kept things normal, they'd never feel the hole." Nathan stepped closer, his voice steady but thick. "I'm not asking you to erase what I missed. I know I can't just walk in and make up for 5 years. But I'm here now. And I don't want to be someone they barely know." She looked down at the floor for a long moment, then back up at him. "They trust easily. It's one of the best things about them, and one of the hardest. Don't be the reason they stop believing in people." "I won't," he said without hesitation. That weekend, Nathan offered to help deliver flowers for a wedding. It was one of the shop's busiest events of the year, and Haley was overwhelmed with logistics. She hesitated at first, reluctant to mix him into her business, but after a moment of deliberation, she handed him a clipboard and a van key. "If you break anything," she warned, "you're paying full price." Nathan grinned. "Deal." What she didn't expect was that he'd show up not just as muscle, but as someone who actually cared. He carried arrangements like they were fragile treasures, followed the checklist meticulously, and even charmed the anxious bride's mother when a last-minute change caused a brief panic. When they returned late that evening, exhausted but satisfied, Haley looked at him differently. Not like a ghost from the past, but a man trying, truly trying, to belong in her present. The twins were asleep in the back room, curled up on a blanket nest of stuffed animals and coloring books. Nathan knelt beside them, adjusting Lily's blanket and brushing a strand of hair from Sophie's forehead. The sight of them sleeping so peacefully, so trustingly, brought tears to his eyes. He wasn't sure if Haley noticed, but she said nothing, simply stood behind him in silence. As he stood up, she finally asked, "What made you stop that day?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "The day you walked in here," she clarified. "It wasn't on your schedule, was it? You don't seem like the type to wander into small flower shops by accident." Nathan smiled faintly. "I was on my way to propose. I stopped for flowers. And then I saw you. Everything changed in 1 second." Haley absorbed that, nodding slowly. "Funny how life works." "I canceled the dinner. Never gave her the ring," he admitted. For the first time, Haley didn't hide her expression. It was surprise, confusion, maybe even a trace of hope. She looked away quickly, but Nathan saw it. That night, as he left the shop and walked down the quiet street under the amber glow of the street lamps, he realized something profound. He had spent his life chasing things that made him feel powerful. Now, for the first time, he was chasing something that made him feel whole. And this time, he wasn't going to run. It was a warm Sunday morning when Nathan arrived at the flower shop and found something different waiting for him. The front door was propped open, sunlight pouring through the windows and casting golden streaks across the wood floor, and laughter echoed from the back garden. He followed the sound instinctively, unsure if he was even invited but too drawn in to care. What he saw made his breath catch. Sophie and Lily were crouched in the grass, their tiny hands covered in dirt, carefully planting something in mismatched ceramic pots. Haley knelt beside them, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, smiling gently as she guided their hands. Nathan didn't speak. He stood quietly by the gate, watching the three of them in their quiet joy. It felt like a window into a life that could have been his all along if he hadn't let fear control him. Eventually, Lily spotted him and waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Nate. Want to help us plant fairy carrots?" He grinned and stepped into the yard, squatting beside them. "Fairy carrots, huh? That sounds like high-level gardening." "They're just regular carrots," Sophie whispered dramatically, "but we say they're fairy carrots so they grow faster. That's the secret." Haley shot him a glance then, something between amusement and warning, but she didn't stop him. For the next hour, Nathan let himself fall into the rhythm of their world, digging soil, pretending to hear fairies whispering in the wind, and getting scolded by Lily for not spacing the seeds properly. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business plans or investor pressure. He was just there, knees in the dirt, laughter in his chest, surrounded by the family he was only beginning to understand. Later that afternoon, as the girls napped inside, Haley poured them each a glass of lemonade and sat with him on the small patio bench. Her posture was more relaxed than usual, the set of her shoulders looser, but Nathan could still feel the distance between them. It wasn't coldness, it was caution. She wasn't protecting herself, she was protecting her daughters. "I've been thinking," she said after a long pause, "about what it would actually mean to let you in. I don't mean for an afternoon or a couple weekends a month. I mean, really in their lives. Their world. Mine." Nathan nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "I've been thinking about it too." She turned toward him slightly, her expression unreadable. "I don't need your money, Nathan. I've been doing this on my own for 5 years. If this is some kind of guilt-driven offer to fix things with a check, please don't." "That's not what this is," he said firmly. "I know I can't undo what I did, or what I didn't do. I missed their first steps. I wasn't there for the late nights or the school plays or the fevers. But I want to be here now. I want to know them. I want them to know me." Haley looked away, toward the garden, her jaw tightening for just a moment. "You don't get to show up and take the easy parts. You don't get the cute moments and the birthday parties if you can't be here for the tantrums and the homework and the days when everything goes wrong. I need to know that if they fall in love with you, you won't disappear." "I won't," he said, and this time there was no hesitation, no corporate polish, no performance. Just truth. She was quiet again. Then she nodded slowly. "Then let's take it slow. No titles. No big announcements. Just time." Over the next few weeks, Nathan became a regular presence. Not just at the shop, but in their lives. He picked the girls up from preschool when Haley was overwhelmed. He learned their routines, their favorite breakfast cereals, which stuffed animal went everywhere with them, the exact way Sophie liked her shoelaces tied. He discovered Lily was afraid of thunderstorms and started calling her during rainy nights just to tell her stories until she fell asleep. It was awkward sometimes, and messy, and exhausting, but it was real. One evening, while cleaning up after closing, Haley handed him a small envelope with a hesitant look. Inside was a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures, 2 adults and 2 children, standing in front of a flower shop. One of the adult figures had blonde hair. "Sophie made it," she said quietly. "She said it was her real family picture. I didn't tell her to do it." Nathan stared at the drawing for a long time, something tight and overwhelming blooming in his chest. He folded it carefully and placed it in his wallet without a word. They didn't talk about the future after that. Not yet. They didn't use words like family or together or us. But in the quiet spaces, between shared chores, whispered goodnights, and the smell of warm soil, they were slowly building something. A fragile, uncertain beginning. And for the first time in his adult life, Nathan didn't want to rush to the finish line. He just wanted to be there, every step of the way. Nathan had finally found a rhythm, one that no longer depended on board meetings or press releases but instead flowed with after-school pickups, flower shop deliveries, and bedtime stories told over the phone when he couldn't be there in person. His days, once meticulously segmented by his assistant, now revolved around the unpredictability of two 5-year-olds who could turn a trip to the grocery store into an adventure or an emotional crisis. But he loved it. He embraced the mess of it, the softness it brought out in him, and the quiet satisfaction of being present in a way he never had before. Haley had begun to trust him more, not completely, not yet, but enough to let him take the girls out on his own. They went to the park together, to a little science museum, and even to a puppet show that he barely survived, thanks to Sophie's habit of loudly correcting the puppets when they got their animal facts wrong. The mornings were his favorite. Sometimes he'd show up early with coffee for Haley and muffins for the girls, and they'd sit on the curb outside the shop before the day began. Lily would talk about her dreams, always filled with animals and flying trees, while Sophie tried to convince Nathan to invest in a lemonade stand they hadn't even built yet. He'd smile, nod, ask follow-up questions. These little conversations, fleeting and chaotic, grounded him more than any corporate strategy ever had. But that peace didn't last. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything nearly unraveled. Nathan had just returned from a delivery when he saw her, Christine, standing outside the flower shop in 6-inch heels and a designer coat, looking entirely out of place amid the buckets of tulips and wooden crates. Her arms were crossed, her expression sharp, and when she spotted him through the glass, she pushed open the door like she owned the building. Haley looked up from the counter, confused. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. Christine's eyes didn't leave Nathan. "I'm here for him." Nathan froze. His past and present had just collided, and it was loud and stunning and messy. "Christine, not here," he said quickly, trying to step outside with her, but she wouldn't budge. "Oh, we're doing this now, Nathan. Because I've been patient. I gave you space. But you disappeared off the face of the earth, and now I find out through a mutual friend that you're playing house in some flower shop with your ex and her kids?" Haley's face shifted immediately. "Excuse me," she said, her voice suddenly hard. Christine turned to her. "You didn't know? He was supposed to propose to me the day he walked in here. We were engaged in everything but name. And now he's what, pretending to be father of the year?" Nathan stepped between them. "Stop. Both of you. This isn't what it looks like." Christine's voice was cold. "Then explain it." Haley's jaw was clenched so tight he thought it might crack. "You were engaged?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to propose, yes. But I didn't. Because I saw you. I saw them." "Everything changed that day," he said, desperate for her to believe him. Haley didn't respond. She just walked into the back room without another word, leaving Christine standing in silence and Nathan too stunned to move. The girls came out a few moments later, holding drawings they had made. Sophie proudly held one up to Nathan. "It's you and us at the zoo," she said brightly. Christine's expression crumbled when she saw it. She looked at Nathan one more time, something bitter in her eyes, then turned and left without saying anything else. That night, Nathan returned to the shop after closing. He knocked on the back door like a stranger, unsure if he would even be allowed in. Haley answered, not angry but tired. There was something deeper in her expression now, not betrayal, but heartbreak. "You should have told me," she said quietly, arms folded over her chest. "Not just about her. About all of it." "I was scared," he admitted. I thought that if I told you everything too soon, I'd ruin it. That if I explained how messy my life was, you'd shut the door before I had a chance to make things right. Haley sat down on the old bench beside the wall of tools. I'm not mad that you had someone else. I'm mad that you didn't trust me enough to be honest. I do trust you, he said quickly, sitting beside her. I'm still learning how to be honest. Not just with you, with myself. I thought success meant keeping everything perfect and polished. But life isn't like that. You've known that longer than I have. She didn't speak for a while. The silence stretched, and he didn't try to fill it. Finally, she said, the girls asked where you went today. I told them you had a meeting. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not unless you ask me to. Haley turned to him, eyes tired but clear. If you want to stay in our lives, Nathan, you have to show them that love isn't something that walks out when it gets hard. You have to prove to them that people can be flawed and still stay. He nodded. I will. For the first time since the explosion earlier that day, she leaned into him, not fully, not with her whole weight, but enough that he could feel it. A sign of trust, fragile and real. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't try to make promises. He just stayed beside her in the quiet, knowing that rebuilding something real was going to take time, effort, and everything he had left to give. Nathan didn't expect forgiveness to come quickly, and he didn't ask for it. What he did instead was show up. Every morning, every afternoon, even when the air between him and Haley felt too quiet, too tense, he kept coming. He watered plants, swept the shop floors, made runs to the supply store without being asked, and left fresh coffee at the counter with her usual order written on the lid in shaky pen. The twins welcomed him back with the same unfiltered joy they always had, but Haley took her time. He understood. Trust, once broken, wasn't glued back together with apologies. It was stitched slowly through consistency. Christine didn't return, but the damage she left behind lingered. Haley had questions she didn't voice, and Nathan felt them in the way she moved around him, carefully, deliberately, as if waiting to see if this version of him would vanish too. But something shifted the morning he arrived early and found Haley sitting alone in the back garden, wrapped in a cardigan, her face drawn. She didn't hear him at first. When she turned to look at him, her eyes were wet but clear. They had a school event yesterday, she said quietly. A little art show. Parents were invited. I didn't tell you because I didn't know if you should be there. I thought it might confuse them. But when I got there and saw all the other kids with two parents standing beside them, I don't know. I felt selfish. Like I was keeping something from them. Nathan sat beside her without hesitation. You were protecting them. I thought I was, she whispered. But maybe I was just protecting myself. He didn't respond right away. The air smelled like damp earth and lavender. Haley, I want to be there. Not just for the fun stuff. For the hard things, too. I want them to know they're not half-loved. I want you to know that, too. Her eyes searched his face for a moment, as if testing the sincerity behind his words. Then she gave a small nod, and for the first time, invited him into something that mattered. The next week, she forwarded him the girls' school calendar and invited him to their next parent-teacher meeting. He showed up early, wearing a shirt Sophie had picked for him because it was the color of blueberries, and sat in a chair far too small for him, listening carefully while the teacher talked about how Lily was already reading at a second-grade level and Sophie had an imagination that wouldn't quit. Afterward, the girls drew a congrats picture for themselves and made him hang it in his car. But Nathan wasn't content with just being present. He wanted to give back in a bigger way, to prove he had grown not only as a father, but as a man. One night, long after the shop had closed, he stayed up sketching out an idea he hadn't been able to shake. He remembered Haley once telling him how hard it had been to find affordable suppliers and how complicated managing inventory was while also raising twins. He thought about other small businesses, especially ones run by single parents, and realized that maybe he could actually build something useful. Not a startup to impress investors or win press coverage, but a platform that made life easier for people like Haley. He called in a few favors, gathered a small team of engineers and designers he trusted, and spent nights in a co-working space breathing life into the idea. It would be a logistics and ordering platform tailored to small, independent flower shops and local artisan businesses, streamlining supply chains, helping manage orders, and even creating a marketplace for people to promote their services. He didn't tell Haley right away. He wanted to build something real before offering it to her. Weeks later, when the first prototype was live and the initial tests were working, he brought it to her during a quiet evening at the shop. She was arranging a display for the weekend market, and he waited until the girls had gone to bed in the back. "I've been working on something," he said, placing his laptop on the counter. "It's not just for you. But you were the reason it started." Haley looked skeptical but curious. As he walked her through the platform, showing her the features, the supplier map, the automatic pricing suggestions, and the order history dashboard, she grew quiet. When he finished, she didn't speak for a long time. "You built this, for people like me?" He nodded. "I built it because I saw how hard you worked. And I realized how many people probably struggle the same way. It's not perfect, but it's a start. If you want, I'd love for your shop to be the first one that uses it." She smiled then, not fully, not completely, but in a way that made him feel like he had just cleared another invisible wall. "I'll test it," she said. "No promises. That's all I'm asking." That night, as he packed up his things and turned to leave, Haley called his name. He turned, eyebrows raised. "You're doing okay," she said softly. And that simple sentence meant more than any approval he'd ever received from boardrooms or billionaires. It wasn't validation. It was trust, growing, slowly, finally. Nathan had never realized how much space love could take up in a life until it began filling all the small, quiet places in his. It wasn't loud or dramatic the way he used to imagine romance would be. It was gentle, woven into daily routines, into the way Sophie tugged on his sleeve when she wanted help tying her shoes, into how Lily insisted he be the one to read the bedtime story because she liked the voices he gave the characters. It was in the way Haley slowly started saying, "we," instead of "I," when she talked about the shop, and how she no longer hesitated to text him when she needed backup. They had created a rhythm, not just in logistics, but in something deeper, an unspoken agreement that they were building something fragile but worth protecting. Haley had agreed to officially onboard the flower shop onto Nathan's platform, and the changes were immediate. She was able to cut her supplier costs by almost 30%, started getting next-day deliveries, and even began offering subscription-based floral arrangements, something she had always wanted to try but never had the resources for. She still didn't give Nathan full credit. She was stubborn and proud, and he respected that, but he could tell she was proud of him. It was there in the way she looked at him when she didn't think he noticed, or the way she brushed her fingers against his shoulder as she passed him in the shop. The girls continued to flourish. They had started asking more questions, curious ones, careful ones. Why did Mr. Nate always come over? Was he staying for dinner again? Could he come to school and meet their friends? It was Haley who finally sat them down and told them, with Nathan beside her, that he was more than a friend. That he was their dad. The word didn't hang heavy the way he thought it might. It didn't spark anger or confusion. It came with wide eyes and quiet nods, and Lily, ever the bolder of the two, simply climbed into his lap and asked if that meant he had to come to every birthday party forever now. He laughed, and said yes, and she said, "Good. Because we were going to make you a crown next time." It was one of the happiest nights of his life. But it was also the beginning of something heavier, a responsibility that now had a name. Father. Not just the biological truth he'd been dancing around for months, but the full meaning of it. Someone who showed up, always. Someone who didn't break promises. Someone who stayed when it got hard. Nathan knew this, and it terrified him. The first real test came when Sophie got sick. Not the flu or a cold, but a sudden, unexplained fever that wouldn't break. Haley took her to the emergency room after a long night of watching her temperature climb, and Nathan met them there within 20 minutes, having dropped everything he was doing. It wasn't serious in the end, just a virus, but sitting beside Sophie's tiny hospital bed, holding her clammy hand while she slept, Nathan realized just how helpless fatherhood could feel. He couldn't fix it. He couldn't negotiate it or reason with it or outwork it. All he could do was be there. And he was. For every minute, every hour. Haley dozed in the corner while he watched over Sophie, eyes never leaving her. The nurse who came in during the morning mistook them for a married couple. Haley corrected her gently, but something passed between them afterward. Not tension, something closer to curiosity. A question they both weren't quite ready to ask out loud. Nathan started sleeping over more often after that. At first it was just when Haley had early deliveries or late inventory nights, and then it became a regular part of the week. He would wake to the smell of coffee brewing, Sophie already in the living room watching cartoons, Lily curled up under his arm. It felt natural, but it also made him more aware of the lingering fragility of what they had. He still hadn't told her he loved her. He didn't want to say the words just to say them. He wanted them to mean something. But every day it became harder not to let them slip out. One Saturday morning, while they were preparing for the town spring market, Haley tripped over a stack of empty buckets and fell hard against a shelf, cutting her arm. It wasn't deep, but it bled enough to need attention. Nathan rushed to her side, his hands shaking more than he wanted to admit as he helped her sit down and held a towel against the wound. "You're bleeding too much," he muttered, trying to stay calm. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth, but her face had gone pale. "You're not," he replied, already pulling out his phone to call urgent care. Haley reached for his hand. "Nathan. Look at me. I'm okay." His breath caught, and their eyes locked. "I'm not. You scared the hell out of me." Her hand tightened around his. "I know. But I'm still here." He didn't call urgent care. They patched it up themselves, sitting side by side in the back room, a first aid kit between them and the smell of soil in the air. She let her head rest against his shoulder, and he let the silence fill in everything they didn't say. That night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Nathan found Haley standing outside on the porch, her injured arm bandaged, her hair a mess, barefoot in the moonlight. He walked up behind her and slipped his hand into hers. "Are you still scared?" she asked him softly. "Terrified," he admitted. "But not of the life. Just of losing it." Haley turned to face him, her expression gentle. "Then don't." He kissed her then, not out of passion or timing or impulse, but out of something real and deeply earned. It wasn't fireworks. It was steadier than that. Like roots settling into soil, finding their place. And for the first time, Nathan knew he wasn't building a life alone anymore. He was finally part of something. And he would protect it with everything he had. Spring turned into summer, and with it came a softening of the spaces between everyone. The shop was now running more smoothly than ever, orders were consistent, the new platform Nathan had built was gaining traction with other local businesses, and Haley's stress over logistics and late deliveries had faded into something manageable. But more importantly, the quiet, daily chaos of family life had transformed into something whole. There was laughter in the mornings, dance parties in the kitchen, sleepy movie nights tangled in blankets on the couch, and moments when Nathan would catch Haley watching him, not with doubt or worry, but with something warm and unguarded, like trust finally taking root. One Friday afternoon, they had a picnic in the park after the girls finished their last day of kindergarten. Lily had demanded they bring balloons, and Sophie insisted on cupcakes, so they did both. Haley wore a sundress Nathan hadn't seen before, her hair tied in a ribbon the same pale yellow as the frosting on the cupcakes. She looked radiant, even after wrangling two excited girls all morning. Nathan had never been so content in silence, lying on the grass, Sophie asleep on his chest, Lily curled against Haley's lap, the smell of sunshine and grass all around them. It was one of those rare afternoons where everything slowed down, and he felt, for once, not like he was chasing time, but like he was living it. Later that night, after the girls were tucked into bed with promises of pancakes and cartoons in the morning, Haley walked into the living room and found Nathan quietly flipping through an old photo album that had been left on the coffee table. He was staring at a picture of Haley from 6 years ago, her face younger, freer, holding a newborn wrapped in a soft pink blanket. There were tears in his eyes when he looked up. "I missed all of this," he said quietly. "I missed their first laughs. Their first words. I missed seeing you become this woman who built a world out of nothing. And no matter what I do now, I can't ever get that time back." Haley sat beside him, her hand brushing his. "You're here now. That matters more than you think." He closed the album, turning to face her fully. "I know we've taken this slow. I know we've had to undo a lot of damage. But Haley, I love you. I've loved you since before I even understood what love really meant. And I don't want to just be someone in your life, I want to be your life. All of it. The hard parts. The boring parts. The parts that make you want to scream and cry and laugh and everything in between." Haley didn't speak at first. She looked at him for a long moment, like she was trying to read something beyond words. Then she leaned in and kissed him softly, like she had been waiting for the right moment to let go of everything she had held back. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I love you too. I've been scared to say it. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I didn't want to lose it again." "You won't," he promised. "Not ever." The next morning, they took the girls to the farmer's market together, and for the first time, Nathan introduced them as his daughters. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness. Just pride in his voice and light in their eyes when he said the word. "Daddy." It felt so natural now, so true, like it had always belonged to him and he'd just taken too long to claim it. Weeks later, on a quiet Sunday, he brought them all to the botanical garden just outside the city. It was Haley's favorite place, though she rarely had time to visit. The girls ran ahead chasing butterflies, and Nathan led Haley to a small gazebo overlooking the lily pond. There, with no audience, no spectacle, he took a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. "I'm not asking because it's the next step," he said. "I'm asking because you're the first person who's ever made me feel like home. You and the girls, you gave me back my life. And I want to spend the rest of it building something with you. No more running. No more fear. Just us, and all the messy, beautiful days ahead." Haley's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. She didn't need grand words. She just said, yes, and kissed him like she meant it. The girls, spotting the hug from a distance, ran back screaming, "What happened? Did you find a bug?" And when Haley told them they were going to be a family, officially, they danced around the gazebo and declared it the best day ever. The wedding was simple, held in the back garden of the flower shop with only close friends and a few curious neighbors. Sophie and Lily walked down the aisle as flower girls, tossing petals with wild enthusiasm, and Haley wore the same sundress she had worn at the picnic because, in her words, it felt like the beginning. Nathan couldn't stop smiling. Not when he said his vows. Not when Haley said hers. Not even when Sophie dropped the ring and Lily had to fish it out of the grass, giggling the entire time. There were no fairy tale illusions. No promises of perfection. Just a shared understanding that they had already walked through the fire and still found their way back to each other. And that was more than enough. Nathan had once thought success was about status, about achievements and money and reputation. But standing in that garden, surrounded by people who knew the full story, who had seen the worst and still chosen to be part of the best, he understood that real success was simpler, deeper, and far more difficult to earn. It was love that stayed. Family that chose you back. And a life that didn't need to be perfect, just real. And finally, he had all of it. This story is not about fairy tale redemption. It's about the slow, painful, and deeply human process of earning trust back, not just from others, but from yourself. Nathan didn't deserve an easy ending, and thankfully, he didn't get one. What he did get was something much rarer, the chance to rebuild from the ground up, to prove that love isn't just a word but a series of choices made every day, especially when it's hard. Haley's strength was never in forgiving quickly. It was in protecting what mattered, in loving her daughters fiercely, and in knowing that second chances should never come cheap. She gave Nathan the space to show who he truly was, not for her sake, but for the girls who would one day look to him as a model of love, responsibility, and resilience. What makes the ending powerful isn't the proposal or the happy family photo. It's the quiet truth that healing is slow, real love is earned, and sometimes, the most unexpected reunions lead to the most lasting homes. The story doesn't shock with drama, it stuns with how ordinary love can be when it's fought for, protected, and finally, safe.